Upon entering the lobby of a 5-star hotel, the millionaire froze when he realized the cleaning lady was his wife, who had disappeared 11 years ago. He walked toward her, and the morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Caldwell Grand Chicago, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floor of the lobby. Ethan Caldwell adjusted his Italian silk tie as he walked through his empire, every footstep echoing with the confidence of a man who had built something extraordinary from the ashes of personal tragedy. At 42, Ethan commanded respect in every room he entered. His dark hair showed distinguished traces of silver at the temples, and his piercing blue eyes held the sharp focus of someone who had learned to see opportunity where others saw only obstacles. The Caldwell hotel chain had become synonymous with luxury across America, each property a testament to his relentless drive to create something beautiful from something broken. Mr. Caldwell, his assistant Marcus, not to be confused with the devil who shared that name, approached with a tablet full of the day's agenda. The quarterly board meeting is at 10, and the Charity Gala Planning Committee wants to discuss the final details for next week's event. Ethan nodded absently, his attention caught by something that made his blood run cold. There, near the grand staircase, a woman in a simple gray cleaning uniform was polishing the marble balustrade with slow, methodical movements. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands, God, those hands, moved with a grace that belonged to someone else entirely, someone who was supposed to be dead. His world tilted on its axis, the tablet in his assistant's hands, the distant murmur of guests checking in, the classical music drifting from the lounge. Everything faded into white noise. 11 years collapsed into a single, impossible moment, Grace. She must have felt his stare because she looked up, and those familiar green eyes that had haunted his dreams and his waking hours alike, met his across the expanse of gleaming marble. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then panic flashed across her features, and she quickly looked away, her movements becoming jerky, desperate. "Sir," his assistant's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" Ethan forced himself to breathe. "I need a moment. Cancel my next appointment." He moved toward her like a man walking through a dream, or a nightmare. She was older now, of course. Lines of exhaustion creased the corners of her eyes, and her hands, which had once been soft and gentle, were now calloused and work-worn. But it was Grace, his wife who had died in a car accident 11 years ago, leaving nothing behind but twisted metal, blood, and a grief so profound it had nearly destroyed him. She saw him approaching, and her entire body went rigid when he was close enough to smell the industrial cleaning solution on her uniform, close enough to see the way her chest rose and fell with barely controlled panic. He whispered the name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. Grace. Her response was immediate and terrifying. She dropped the cleaning cloth and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her fingernails digging into his skin. "You need to pretend you don't know me," she whispered, her voice hoarse with desperation. "Or we'll all die." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What are you?" "Listen to me carefully," she interrupted, her eyes darting around the lobby to make sure no one was watching. "I'm going to pick up my supplies and walk away. You're going to let me. You're going to go back to your office and pretend this never happened. Like hell I am." His voice was low, dangerous. "You're supposed to be dead, Grace. I buried an empty coffin. I mourned you for 3 years before I could even..." He stopped himself, thinking of Olivia, of Noah. What kind of game is this? Tears welled up in her eyes, but her grip on his wrist tightened. The kind where innocent people die if you don't listen. The kind where a little boy loses his father and a woman loses her husband because you couldn't walk away. Noah. She knew about Noah. The realization sent ice through his veins. "Meet me tonight," she continued, her voice barely audible. "Millennium Park, the Bean, midnight. Come alone or don't come at all." She released his wrist and bent to retrieve her cleaning supplies, her movements now those of a woman who had learned to be invisible. As she straightened, she looked at him one last time, and the pain in her eyes was so raw, so devastating, that he had to grip the marble banister to keep from reaching for her. "Grace, wait." But she was already walking away, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. She disappeared through a service door marked "Employees Only." leaving behind nothing but the faint scent of lemon cleaning solution and the impossible reality that his dead wife was very much alive. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of his lobby, surrounded by the luxury he had built as a monument to their lost love, and tried to process what had just happened. Guests moved around him, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had just shattered and reformed in the space of a 3-minute conversation. His phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Don't forget Noah has soccer practice at 4. Love you." The normalcy of it, the sweet domesticity of his current life, made him feel like he was drowning. Olivia, beautiful, kind Olivia, who had helped him heal from the devastating loss of Grace. Olivia who had given him Noah, the light of his life. Olivia who deserved so much better than a husband whose supposedly dead first wife had just materialized like a ghost in his hotel lobby. He thought about the years after Grace's death, the drinking, the rage, the way he had thrown himself into building his hotel empire because work was the only thing that could silence the screaming in his head. He thought about the night he met Olivia at a grief counseling session, how her gentle presence had slowly, carefully helped him remember what it felt like to be human again. And Noah, God, Noah, his 7-year-old son with Olivia's warm brown eyes and his own stubborn chin. Noah who was probably in school right now, learning about fractions and worried about whether he'd made the soccer team, completely unaware that his father's past had just walked back into their lives like a bomb with a lit fuse. Mr. Caldwell, his assistant, had followed him, concern written across his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan almost laughed at the accuracy of that statement. Instead, he straightened his tie and forced his features into the mask of control he had perfected over the years. "I'm fine, just remembering something I'd rather forget." He pulled out his phone and canceled his remaining appointments with swift, efficient taps. "I need to step out for a while, handle anything urgent, and if you can't handle it, it'll wait until tomorrow." As he walked toward the elevator that would take him to his private office, Ethan caught sight of his reflection in the polished brass doors. He looked older than he had that morning, as if the brief encounter with Grace had aged him years in minutes. The elevator rose smoothly toward the penthouse level, carrying him away from the lobby where his past and present had collided with devastating force. But no amount of distance could erase the image of Grace's terrified eyes, or the desperate urgency in her voice. "You need to pretend you don't know me, or we'll all die." Who was we? And what kind of danger was she in, that could threaten not just her, but his family as well? As the elevator doors opened onto his executive floor, Ethan realized that everything he thought he knew about his life, his loss, and his carefully reconstructed happiness was about to change forever. The ghost in the marble had returned, and she had brought secrets that could destroy them all. The bean stood like a silver mirror against the Chicago night sky, its polished surface reflecting the city lights in fragmented patterns that seemed to shift with every breath of wind. Millennium Park was nearly empty at midnight, save for a few late-night joggers and the occasional couple stealing a romantic moment beneath the sculpture. Ethan had arrived 20 minutes early, unable to stay in his penthouse office a moment longer. The hours since seeing Grace had passed in a blur of canceled meetings and unanswered phone calls. He'd gone through the motions of normalcy, picking up Noah from soccer practice, having dinner with his family, helping with homework. But every moment felt like he was watching someone else's life through thick glass. "You came." He turned to find Grace emerging from the shadows near the sculpture's base. She'd changed out of her cleaning uniform into dark jeans and a black hoodie that made her blend into the darkness. Even in the dim light, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the way she moved like someone who had learned to expect danger around every corner. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Grace, what the hell is going on? How are you alive? Where have you been for 11 years? She glanced around the park nervously before stepping closer. "We can't stay here long. He has people everywhere. He, Marcus Davenport," the name came out like a curse. "The man who owns me. The man who's been using me to get to you." Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Start from the beginning. All of it. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, and for a moment she looked exactly like the woman he'd married 15 years ago. Vulnerable, beautiful, afraid. Then the mask slipped back into place, and he saw the hardened survivor she'd become. "Do you remember that morning, 11 years ago?" she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you about the pregnancy test. I was so excited, Ethan. I had it all planned out. How I'd surprise you. What we'd name the baby. How we'd redecorate the spare room." The memory hit him like a punch to the chest. He'd been in San Francisco on business, had missed her calls because he was in back-to-back meetings. By the time he'd gotten the message about the accident, she was already gone. "I never got to tell you," she continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because that same morning, they took Lily. Lily." His sister-in-law's name felt foreign on his tongue. Grace's younger sister had been studying abroad in college when Grace died. He'd lost touch with her family in his grief. Marcus's men grabbed her outside her dorm. "Called me while I was still holding the pregnancy test." Grace's voice broke. "They said if I didn't do exactly what they told me, they'd kill her. And what they wanted was information about you, your hotels, your business partners, your security systems. Everything." Ethan's mind raced. The money laundering rumors, the FBI investigation that went nowhere. Marcus needed clean businesses to wash his drug money. Your hotels were perfect. High-end, international, cash-heavy, but he needed someone on the inside. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He gave me a choice. Help him destroy you, or watch my little sister die. So you faked your death. I crashed my car into that bridge on purpose, had a body from the morgue. Some Jane Doe who'd been there for months, made sure there was enough blood." "Enough," she shuddered. "Marcus's people cleaned up the scene before the police arrived, made it look like I'd been thrown from the car into the river." The clinical way she described it made Ethan's skin crawl. "And then I became Socorro Martinez. Illegal immigrant, no family, no past. I've been living in Marcus's world ever since, gathering information on wealthy businessmen, hotel owners, real estate developers, tech moguls, anyone with enough money and property to be useful. For 11 years, the number felt impossible. Grace, I remarried. I have a son." Pain flashed across her features, but she nodded. "Noah. He's beautiful, Ethan. He looks just like you did when you were little." The casual way she said it, like she'd been watching from a distance, made his blood run cold. "How do you know what my son looks like?" "Because I've been working at your hotel for 2 months. She pulled out a fake ID card from her pocket. "Socorro Martinez, housekeeping staff." Marcus finally decided it was time to make his move. He wants control of your hotels, and he's tired of waiting. "So he sent you to spy on me directly." "No." Her voice was fierce now. "I volunteered, because I found out he was planning to kill you." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his feet, as the full magnitude of her sacrifice began to sink in. 11 years, he repeated slowly. "You've been living as a spy, gathering information for a monster, all to protect Lily and me. Lily's still alive because I do what he says. You're still alive because I've been feeding him useless information and steering him away from your most valuable properties." She stepped closer, and he could smell the desperation on her. "But it's over now, Ethan. He's done waiting. He wants 50% of your hotel chain, and if you don't give it to him, he'll take it all by force. Then we call the police, the FBI. With what proof?" she interrupted. "I'm legally dead, remember? And Marcus has been very careful. Nothing ties back to him directly. He's got judges on his payroll, cops, federal agents. The few times someone got close to exposing him, they had accidents, very permanent accidents." Ethan thought about his family, about Noah sleeping peacefully in his bed, about Olivia, who had no idea that her world was about to implode. "What about my son? My wife? That's why I'm here. That's why I risked everything to warn you." Grace's voice was desperate now. "Marcus knows about them. He knows how much they mean to you. If you don't cooperate, he'll use them as leverage. How long do we have?" "I don't know. Days, maybe weeks. He's been distracted lately by some internal power struggle, but it won't last forever." She glanced at her watch. "I have to go. If I'm gone too long, people will notice." "Grace, wait." He caught her arm as she turned to leave. "The baby. Our baby. What happened?" For the first time that night, something that might have been a smile crossed her face. "She happened, and she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, even though I can't." Her voice broke. even though she'll never know I'm her mother." Before he could ask what she meant, Grace had melted back into the shadows, leaving him alone beneath the bean, with more questions than answers, and the crushing weight of 11 years of lies settling on his shoulders. As he walked back to his car, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "You've been quiet tonight. Everything okay? Love you." He stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Everything's fine. Love you too." But as he drove through the empty Chicago streets toward the home and family he might lose, Ethan knew that nothing would ever be fine again. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains of the Caldwell family's Lincoln Park home, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors. Olivia Bennett Caldwell stood at the kitchen island, her auburn hair catching the sunlight as she packed Noah's lunch with the practiced efficiency of a mother who had turned routine into an art form. At 35, Olivia possessed the kind of understated beauty that came from genuine warmth rather than careful maintenance. Her brown eyes held intelligence and compassion in equal measure, the same qualities that had made her an exceptional child psychologist before she'd scaled back her practice to focus on her family. She hummed softly as she worked, a habit Noah had inherited, and one that never failed to make Ethan smile. When she was being honest with herself, which was increasingly rare these days, Olivia knew she had built her happiness on a foundation of lies. But watching Noah bounce into the kitchen with his dark hair sticking up at impossible angles and his father's stubborn chin set in determination, she could almost convince herself that the ends justified the means. "Mom, Tommy says soccer tryouts are this afternoon, but I thought they were tomorrow," Noah announced, sliding into his chair at the breakfast nook. His Chicago Fire jersey was already on, even though school didn't start for another hour. "There today, sweetheart," Olivia confirmed, ruffling his hair as she set his plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. "Dad's going to pick you up early from school, remember?" "Where is Dad?" Noah asked around a mouthful of eggs. "He was acting weird last night, like when Grandma calls and he has to pretend he likes her meatloaf." Olivia's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Ethan had been distant the night before, distracted in a way that went beyond his usual work stress when she'd tried to talk to him about it. He'd brushed off her concerns with the kind of forced smile he used during difficult business meetings. "He had an early meeting," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Ethan had been gone when she woke up, leaving only a hastily scrawled note about breakfast appointments and a promise to be back in time for Noah's pickup. "Is everything okay with Dad's work?" Noah's question was casual, but Olivia caught the underlying worry. Her son was sensitive to emotional undercurrents in a way that sometimes surprised her. It was a trait she recognized from her own childhood, the hypervigilance that came from living with secrets. "Everything's fine, baby." The lie slipped out easily, practiced over years of protecting her son from truths he was too young to understand. Sometimes grown-ups just have a lot on their minds. After Noah left for school, Olivia retreated to her home office, a sun-drenched room overlooking their garden, where she still saw a few private patients. The space was her sanctuary, filled with books on child psychology, family photos, and the kind of comfortable furniture that invited people to share their deepest fears. But today, surrounded by the trappings of the life she'd built, Olivia felt like a fraud. She pulled out her laptop and opened an encrypted email account that officially didn't exist. One new message, sent at 3:47 a.m. "The timeline has moved up. He knows she's there. Handle the situation before it becomes a problem." Olivia's hands trembled as she read the message twice, then deleted it permanently. Marcus, her brother, the man whose name she couldn't speak aloud in this house, whose very existence was a cancer eating away at everything good in her life. She thought about the day she'd met Ethan at the grief counseling group 8 years ago. He'd been raw with loss, broken in a way that called to every nurturing instinct she possessed. She genuinely wanted to help him heal, had fallen in love with his strength, his determination to rebuild something beautiful from the ashes of his tragedy. What she'd never told him was that her presence in that group hadn't been accidental. Marcus had sent her there with specific instructions. Get close to Ethan Caldwell. Gain his trust. Become indispensable. What Marcus hadn't counted on was that his little sister would actually fall in love with her target, that she would fight him tooth and nail when he tried to use Noah as leverage, that she would choose her husband and son over her own flesh and blood. The internal war had been raging for years now. Every family dinner, every bedtime story, every kiss. Goodnight was tainted by the knowledge that she was living a lie, but it was also real. Her love for Ethan was real. Her fierce protectiveness of Noah was real. The family they'd built together might have started as an assignment, but it had become the most genuine thing in her life. Her phone rang, interrupting her spiral of guilt. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she answered, trying to keep her voice light. "How's your morning going?" "Fine." His voice was clipped, distracted. "Listen, I might be late picking up Noah today. Could you handle it?" "Of course, but Ethan..." "Thanks, I have to go." The line went dead, leaving Olivia staring at her phone with growing unease. In 8 years of marriage, Ethan had never missed one of Noah's soccer practices. The man who rearranged board meetings to attend school plays didn't just forget about pickup duty. She was still puzzling over his behavior when Noah burst through the front door 3 hours early, his backpack sliding off his shoulder as he ran toward her office. Mom, look what I found." "Noah, honey, you're supposed to be in school. I forgot my science project, so Mrs. Peterson let me come home to get it." He was breathless with excitement, holding something in his small fist. "But look what I found in Dad's desk drawer." Olivia's blood turned to ice as Noah opened his hand to reveal a photograph. It was old, slightly faded, showing a woman with dark hair and green eyes laughing at something off camera. She was beautiful in an effortless way, wearing a simple sundress that suggested the photo had been taken during a casual, happy moment. The woman looked nothing like Olivia. "Who is she?" Noah asked, his 7-year-old curiosity shining in his eyes. "Dad looked really sad when I saw this picture yesterday, like when we watch sad movies and you cry." Olivia's mind raced. She'd never seen this photograph before, had no idea Ethan still kept pictures of his first wife. Grace had been a taboo subject in their house, not because Ethan had forbidden discussion, but because it seemed cruel to force a man to relive his greatest loss. She began, then stopped. How did you explain to a child that his father had been married before? That there had been another woman who might have given him children? Might have built the kind of life Olivia now enjoyed? "That's someone your father knew a long time ago," she said finally. "Before he met me. Was she his girlfriend?" The innocent question hit like a physical blow. Something like that. Noah studied the photograph with the intense focus he usually reserved for video games. "She's pretty. She looks nice. What happened to her?" She went away, sweetheart. Sometimes people go away and they can't come back. Like when Grandpa died." "Yes, like that." Noah nodded solemnly, accepting the explanation with the resilience of childhood. But as he headed upstairs to retrieve his forgotten science project, Olivia remained frozen in her chair, staring at the photograph of a woman who shouldn't exist in their lives, but somehow did. Grace Caldwell, Ethan's first wife, the woman whose death had created the space in Ethan's life that Olivia now occupied. As she looked at the image of the laughing woman with green eyes, Olivia realized that her carefully constructed world was starting to crack, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Marcus whispered that this was exactly what he'd been waiting for. The photograph trembled in her hands as she considered the possibilities. Had Ethan been lying to her about his first wife's death? Was Grace Caldwell somehow still alive? And if she was, what did that mean for the family Olivia had built on the foundation of another woman's supposed grave? The St. Catherine's Children's Home sat like a fortress of faded brick on Chicago's South Side, its windows reflecting the gray October sky with institutional indifference. The building had housed unwanted children for over 60 years, and despite the cheerful murals painted on the walls and the determined optimism of the staff, it carried the weight of countless broken dreams in its very foundation. Sophia Martinez, the name she'd been given when she arrived as a bewildered infant, stood at the window of the second-floor dormitory, watching the other children play in the courtyard below. At 10 years old, she possessed an old soul that set her apart from her peers. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her green eyes held an intelligence that sometimes made the adults uncomfortable, as if she could see through their well-meaning lies to the harder truths beneath. "Soph, you coming to art therapy?" called Maya, her bunkmate and closest friend. Maya was 8, had been at St. Catherine's since she was 3, and possessed the kind of relentless cheerfulness that served as armor against disappointment. "In a minute," Sophia replied, not turning from the window, She was watching for the volunteer lady who came every Wednesday, the one with the sad eyes who always brought extra snacks and stayed longer than the others, who looked at Sophia like she was seeing a ghost. The woman never said much, just helped with homework, read stories to the younger kids, and made sure everyone got seconds at snack time. But Sophia had noticed things. The way the woman's hands shook when she braided Sophia's hair, the tears she tried to hide when she thought no one was looking, the fact that she only ever volunteered when Sophia was around. Never on the days when Sophia was at school or visiting the dentist. "She's here," Sophia whispered to herself as a familiar figure approached the building. Even from 3 stories up, she could recognize that walk, purposeful but hesitant, like someone approaching something that caused both joy and pain. Sophia had learned early that information was power at St. Catherine's. The kids who survived and thrived were the ones who paid attention, who noticed patterns, who could read the adults and predict their moods. So she'd made it her business to learn everything she could about the mysterious volunteer. Her name was Grace Donovan. According to the sign-in sheet, she worked nights at some cleaning company, which explained why she could volunteer during the day when most adults were at work. She never talked about family, never mentioned children of her own, but she knew lullabies in Spanish and English, and could fix a scraped knee with the gentle efficiency of someone who'd had practice. Most importantly, she always brought exactly the same amount of money, $50, to donate to Sophia's college fund. The social workers thought it was generous but random. Sophia knew better. Random didn't happen every month for 3 years running. Sophia, Mrs. Patterson, the head social worker, called from the bottom of the stairs. "Your tutor is here." That was another thing. Sophia was the only kid at St. Catherine's who had a private tutor funded by an anonymous benefactor. The other children got help with homework from overworked volunteers, but Sophia got 3 hours a week with Mr. Chen, who taught her advanced math and helped her read books that were years above her grade level. The adults thought she didn't understand, but Sophia knew exactly what was happening. Someone was paying for her education, her dental care, her clothes that were always just a little nicer than what the other kids wore. Someone was watching out for her from a distance, making sure she had opportunities the others didn't. Someone who couldn't or wouldn't claim her but refused to let her go without. As she walked down the stairs to meet Mr. Chen, Sophia caught sight of Grace Donovan in the common room, kneeling next to a little boy who was crying over a broken toy. The woman's face was soft with compassion, but when she looked up and saw Sophia watching, that familiar pain flickered across her features. "Hi, Miss Grace," Sophia said, detouring from her path to the tutoring room. "Hello, sweetheart." Grace's voice always got a little rough when she talked to Sophia directly. "How was school today?" "Good. We're learning about family trees and social studies." Sophia watched Grace's face carefully. "Mrs. Martinez says some trees have missing branches, but that doesn't make them less beautiful." Grace's composure cracked for just a moment before she recovered. "Mrs. Martinez sounds very wise." "She is. She says sometimes people love each other even when they can't be together, like soldiers who go to war, or parents who give their babies to other families because they want them to be safe." The color drained from Grace's face. Sophia, let's get started." Mr. Chen's voice interrupted them. He stood in the doorway of the tutoring room, his expression patient but firm. "We have a lot to cover today." As Sophia reluctantly followed her tutor, she glanced back to see Grace standing frozen in the common room, one hand pressed to her mouth as if holding back words that wanted to escape. The tutoring session passed in a blur of algebraic equations and reading comprehension, but Sophia's mind kept wandering to the look on Grace's face. She'd seen that expression before, in the mirror, when she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have a real family, parents who chose her, a home that was hers alone. After Mr. Chen left, Sophia found Grace in the kitchen, helping prepare snacks for the younger children. The woman worked with quiet efficiency, her movements economical and practiced. She'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing a small scar on her wrist that looked like it came from something sharp. "Miss Grace," Sophia approached carefully. "Can I ask you something?" Grace looked up, wariness replacing the earlier warmth. "Of course. Why do you come here to volunteer?" "I mean, most people come because they're thinking about adoption, or because they used to live in a place like this. But you're different." The apple Grace had been cutting slipped, and she had to grab it before it rolled off the counter. "I come because children need help. It's important to give back to the community. It was the kind of answer adults gave when they didn't want to tell the truth. Sophia had heard dozens of them over the years. My friend Maya thinks you're my secret mom, Sophia said conversationally, watching Grace's reaction. She says you look at me the way her foster mom looked at her before the adoption fell through. Grace's knife stilled against the cutting board. Sophia, I told her that was silly. If you were my mom, you would have kept me. Right. You wouldn't have given me away unless something really bad happened. Something that made it dangerous for me to be with you. Tears were streaming down Grace's face now, but she didn't seem to notice. Sweetheart, you don't understand. I understand more than you think. Sophia moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I understand that someone pays for my tutoring, my clothes, my dental visits. Someone who cares but can't say so. Someone who visits but can't stay. Grace was trembling now, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. I have to go. Miss Grace. Wait. But Grace was already grabbing her purse, already moving toward the exit, with the desperate urgency of someone fleeing a crime scene. She paused at the door, looking back at Sophia with such raw anguish that it took the girl's breath away. I love you, Grace whispered, the words barely audible. I love you more than life itself. Don't ever forget that. And then she was gone, leaving Sophia standing alone in the kitchen with the terrible, wonderful knowledge that she'd been right all along. Someone did love her. Someone was watching over her. Someone who couldn't be her mother but refused to let her be truly alone. As she walked back to the dormitory, Sophia made a decision. She was going to find out the truth about Grace Donovan, no matter what it cost. Because love like that, love that paid bills and attended parent conferences and bought birthday presents from anonymous benefactors, didn't just happen by accident that night. As she lay in her narrow bed listening to Maya's soft snoring, Sophia stared at the ceiling and imagined what it would be like to have a real family. Not the fantasy version she'd dreamed about as a little girl, but the complicated, dangerous, beautiful reality that Grace's presence suggested, somewhere out there. She had a story, a beginning that had been torn away from her, people who belonged to her, a name that wasn't chosen from a list of saint names by overworked social workers. And somehow, Grace Donovan was going to help her find it. The warehouse on Chicago's industrial South Side looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. But inside, Marcus Davenport had built an empire that stretched across 3 states and generated more money in a month than most people saw in a lifetime. At 45, Marcus possessed the kind of cold charisma that made people want to please him, even as every instinct screamed that he was dangerous. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly styled, his suits custom-tailored, his smile practiced and empty. He looked like a successful businessman, which, in a way, he was. The fact that his business involved moving drugs, laundering money, and eliminating problems with extreme prejudice was just a detail. Tell me again why my sister thinks she can ignore my messages, Marcus said, his voice carrying the deceptive calm that his associates had learned to fear. He stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back, looking out through bulletproof glass at the rows of computers where his money laundering operation hummed along with corporate efficiency. Vincent, his lieutenant and personal enforcer, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Olivia's been careful lately. She only responds to the most urgent communications. I think she's trying to protect her family. Her family. Marcus tasted the words like something bitter. Let me be clear about something, Vincent. Olivia has one family that matters, and it's the one that kept her fed and clothed and alive when our parents decided drugs were more important than their children. Everything else. The husband, the kid, the pretty little house in Lincoln Park. That's just an assignment that got out of hand. He turned from the window, his gray eyes cold as winter lake water. How long has it been since she's provided useful intelligence? 6 months, maybe more. The last significant information was about Caldwell's acquisition of those hotels in Miami. Before that, Vincent consulted his tablet. She's been feeding us maintenance schedules, staff changes, mostly useless operational details. And our friend Grace, how is she adjusting to her new role? That's more complicated. Vincent pulled up security footage on his tablet. She's been working at the Caldwell Grand for 2 months, just like you ordered, but my sources say she's been asking questions. about security protocols, about Caldwell's personal schedule, about his family. Marcus studied the grainy footage of Grace mopping floors in the hotel lobby. Even in the poor-quality surveillance video, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she moved like someone expecting an attack. "She's planning something," he concluded. 11 years of perfect compliance, and now she's getting ideas above her station. Should I bring her in? Not yet. Let her think she's being clever. Sometimes the best way to control a rat is to let it think it's found a way out of the maze. Marcus moved to a locked cabinet and withdrew a bottle of 30-year-old scotch. But increased surveillance. I want to know every breath she takes, every word she speaks, every person she talks to. Vincent nodded, making notes on his tablet. What about the daughter? What about her? Grace has been visiting more frequently. The orphanage staff are starting to notice if she gets too attached. She's already too attached. Marcus poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and savored the burn. That's what makes her useful. Love makes people predictable, Vincent. Fear keeps them in line. But love makes them stupid. He walked to another monitor, this one showing the interior of what looked like a comfortable apartment. A woman sat on a couch, reading a book, her dark hair streaked with premature gray. She looked older than her 29 years, worn down by captivity in ways that had nothing to do with physical comfort. Lily Chen had been Marcus's guest for 11 years, and she'd aged into the kind of resigned docility that came from having no hope left. She was fed well, clothed appropriately, given books and television and even a small garden on the apartment's balcony. What she didn't have was freedom or contact with anyone beyond her guards, or any knowledge of whether her sister was still alive. "How is our other house guest?" Marcus asked. "Quiet, compliant. She finished another painting yesterday. A landscape of some place she probably saw as a child. Dr. Reeves says she's showing signs of learned helplessness, complete institutional dependency. She wouldn't survive a week on her own now." Marcus nodded with satisfaction. Lily had been the perfect leverage for 11 years. The invisible chain that kept Grace bound to his service. Even if Grace had wanted to run, to disappear into whatever new identity she could create, she couldn't abandon her little sister. Family loyalty was both a strength and a fatal weakness. And Marcus had built his empire on understanding the difference. And the boy? Caldwell's son? Vincent pulled up another file. Noah Caldwell, age 7, attends Lincoln Elementary, plays soccer, straight A student, lives with his father and stepmother in a house that has excellent security but predictable routines. If we needed leverage, we won't need leverage if my sister does her job correctly. Marcus's voice carried a warning. Olivia has had 8 years to position herself as indispensable to Ethan Caldwell. If she can't deliver his cooperation now, then perhaps it's time to reevaluate her usefulness. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Marcus read it twice, his expression darkening with each word. "It seems our Grace has been busy," he said finally. "She made contact with Caldwell yesterday, had a conversation in Millennium Park at midnight." Vincent straightened in his chair. "Orders. Double the surveillance on both of them. I want to know what they discussed, what they're planning, how much Caldwell knows about our operation." Marcus finished his scotch and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "And Vincent? It might be time to remind Grace why she stays in line. The sister, the daughter." Marcus smiled, and Vincent suppressed a shiver. "Grace has been visiting that orphanage more frequently. She's getting sentimental, thinking she can have some kind of relationship with the child. Perhaps it's time to relocate little Sophia to somewhere more secure. She's just a kid, boss, 10 years old." Marcus's smile never wavered. "So was Lily when I took her. Age doesn't make someone less useful as leverage, Vincent. Sometimes it makes them more effective." Vincent nodded reluctantly and made more notes. He'd been with Marcus for 7 years, had done things that would haunt him forever. But there was something about threatening children that still made his stomach turn. Not that his conscience mattered. In Marcus's world, you followed orders, or you became an example for the next person. "What about Olivia?" Vincent asked. "If we move against the kid, she'll know something's wrong. Let her wonder my dear sister has been playing house for too long, forgetting who she really works for. A little uncertainty might remind her where her loyalties should lie." Marcus returned to his window, looking out at the industrial wasteland that surrounded his carefully hidden empire. Somewhere out there, Grace was probably convincing herself that she could save everyone. Her husband, her daughter, her sister, even his traitorous sister who'd chosen love over family. It would almost be touching if it weren't so naive. The truth was that Marcus held all the cards and always had. Grace could run, could hide, could even kill him if she got lucky. But Lily would still be his prisoner. Sophia would still be vulnerable. And Olivia would still be trapped between two worlds that couldn't coexist. He'd built his web carefully over 11 years, and now it was time to see how many flies he could catch before it all came crashing down. Grace was scrubbing the marble floors of the Caldwell Grand's executive level when her burner phone vibrated against her hip. The sound sent ice through her veins. Marcus only used this number for emergencies, and in her world, emergencies meant someone was about to die. She glanced around the empty hallway, ensuring she was alone, before pulling out the cheap prepaid phone with trembling fingers. Your midnight stroll was very romantic. Conference room B in 20 minutes. Come alone. The phone slipped from Grace's hands, clattering against the marble she'd been cleaning. Marcus knew, somehow, despite all her precautions, despite choosing the most isolated location she could think of, he knew about her meeting with Ethan. 20 minutes later, Grace stood outside conference room BI on the hotel's mezzanine level, her cleaning cart abandoned in a supply closet 3 floors below. Her hands shook as she reached for the door handle, knowing that whatever waited on the other side would change everything. Marcus sat at the head of the polished conference table, looking perfectly at ease in his expensive suit. He could have been any high-powered businessman conducting a meeting, except for the laptop in front of him displaying surveillance footage of her conversation with Ethan beneath the bean. "Hello, Grace? Or should I say Socorro? It's so hard to keep track of your identities these days. How long have you been watching?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Long enough?" Marcus gestured to the chair beside him with mock courtesy. "Please sit. We have so much to discuss." Grace remained standing, every muscle in her body coiled for fight or flight. "Where's Lily?" "Safe, for now." Marcus pressed a key on his laptop, and the surveillance footage was replaced by a live feed of Lily sitting in her apartment prison, reading a book and looking older than her 29 years. "Your sister sends her love, by the way, although she doesn't know she's sending it, since she still believes you're dead. What do you want?" Marcus, straight to business. "I admire that about you, Grace. 11 years of perfect service, and you still haven't learned the value of small talk." He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. "I want to know what you told your husband. I want to know what he's planning. And I want to know why you thought you could betray me after everything I've done for you." "Done for me?" Grace's voice cracked with disbelief. "You destroyed my life. You stole my daughter's childhood. You turned me into a spy against the man I love. I gave you purpose. I kept your sister alive when it would have been easier to kill her. I allowed you to give birth to a child who has been very well cared for, thanks to my generosity." Marcus turned from the window, his gray eyes cold and calculating. "And in return, all I asked was your cooperation in a simple business arrangement. Laundering drug money through Ethan's hotels isn't a business arrangement, it's survival. For you, for Lily, for that precious daughter you think I don't know about." Marcus smiled, and Grace felt her world tilt on its axis. "Did you really think I didn't know about your weekly visits to St. Catherine's? About the anonymous donations? About the private tutoring sessions?" Grace's legs gave out, and she collapsed into the nearest chair. "You've been watching, Sophia. I've been watching all of you. It's what I do, Grace. I identify what people love most, and then I make sure they understand the cost of disappointing me." The laptop screen changed again, this time showing the interior of St. Catherine's Children's Home. Grace watched in horror as the feed focused on Sophia in the common room, helping younger children with their homework. Her daughter, beautiful, intelligent, innocent, had no idea she was being watched by a monster. "She's lovely," Marcus continued conversationally. "Very bright. According to her teachers, advanced for her age. It would be a shame if something happened to her." "Don't!" The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of every prayer Grace had ever uttered. "Please, Marcus, she's just a child. She doesn't even know who I am." But she could, in fact. I think it's time for a family reunion. Marcus returned to his seat, his movements predatory and calm. Vincent is collecting little Sophia as we speak. Don't worry. We'll tell the orphanage staff that she's being transferred to a private facility. Very generous benefactors. Wonderful opportunities for a bright girl like her. Grace launched herself across the table. But Marcus was ready for her. His hand shot out, catching her wrist in a grip that sent fire up her arm. "Sit down, Grace. We're not finished talking." She collapsed back into her chair, defeated and desperate. "What do you want?" "I want your husband to sign over 50% of his hotel chain to a shell corporation I've established. Clean ownership. Legal transfer. No questions asked. In return, your daughter gets to grow up knowing her mother. Your sister gets to see sunlight again. And your husband gets to keep breathing. Ethan will never agree to that. The hotels are his life's work. Then you'd better be very persuasive." Marcus closed the laptop with a soft click. "You have 24 hours, Grace. After that, little Sophia disappears permanently, and you get to spend the rest of your very short life knowing that your selfishness killed an innocent child." Grace felt something break inside her chest, the last vestige of hope she'd been carrying for 11 years. "And if he agrees, if Ethan gives you what you want, then maybe we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. I'm getting tired of micromanaging your family drama. Perhaps it's time for you all to have a proper reunion." Marcus's smile was cold and empty. In the afterlife, the conference room door opened, and Vincent entered with his usual efficiency. "Package secured, boss. No complications." Grace shot to her feet, her maternal instincts overriding every survival mechanism she'd developed. "Where is she?" "Where's my daughter?" "Safe," Marcus said simply. "For now, Vincent. Please escort Ms. Martinez back to her duties and remind her that housekeeping staff shouldn't be found in executive conference rooms." As Vincent's hand closed on her arm, Grace turned back to Marcus with desperation and fury warring in her voice. "You're a monster. I'm a businessman, Grace, and you're an employee who's forgotten her place." Marcus was already opening another laptop, dismissing her as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. 24 hours. Don't disappoint me. An hour later, Grace stood in the supply closet where she'd abandoned her cleaning cart, hyperventilating as the full weight of the situation crashed over her. Sophia was gone. Her daughter, the little girl who'd been asking too many questions, who'd been getting too close to the truth, was now in Marcus's hands. Her burner phone buzzed with a text message. "Tell your husband that the price of his family's safety just went up." Both families. Grace stared at the message until the words blurred together. Both families. Marcus wasn't just threatening Sophia and Lily anymore. He was going after Noah and Olivia too. She thought about Ethan's son. Innocent. Trusting Noah, who looked so much like his father. She thought about Olivia, who'd given Ethan the strength to rebuild his life after Grace's supposed death. Two more innocent people who were about to be swept up in the web of lies and violence that had defined Grace's existence for 11 years. There was no choice now. No more careful planning. No more gradual revelation of truths. She had to tell Ethan everything. About Marcus. About Sophia. About the danger they were all in. She had to trust that the man she'd married 15 years ago still existed somewhere beneath the grief and time and new love he'd built his life around. Because if she couldn't save her daughter, if she couldn't protect the family Ethan had built with Olivia, then the last 11 years of sacrifice and suffering would have been for nothing. Grace pulled out her phone and typed a message to Ethan. "Emergency. Meet me tonight. Same place. Same time. Bring nothing. Trust no one. Our daughter's life depends on it." She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send, watching her words disappear into the digital ether that connected her broken world to his carefully constructed one. 24 hours to save everyone she loved. It would have to be enough. Olivia Bennett Caldwell had perfected the art of living with secrets. But the photograph Noah had found was unraveling 8 years of careful deception with surgical precision. She sat in her home office, staring at Grace's image while her world quietly collapsed around her. Her encrypted phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. "Time's up, little sister. Handle the Caldwell situation or I'll handle it permanently." She deleted the message and threw the phone across the room, watching it skitter under her desk. For 8 years, she'd walked the impossible line between love and loyalty, between the family she'd chosen and the monster she shared blood with. Now that line had disappeared entirely. The sound of Ethan's car in the driveway made her heart race. He'd been gone all day, ignoring her calls, responding to her texts with single-word answers. When she'd asked about dinner, he'd simply said he had meetings and would be late, but it was barely 6 o'clock, and he was home with the kind of manic energy that suggested his carefully controlled world was spinning apart. "Olivia," his voice echoed through the house, sharp with barely contained panic. "In here," she called, quickly sliding Grace's photograph into her desk drawer. Ethan appeared in her doorway looking like a man who'd been hit by a truck. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and his eyes held the wild desperation of someone who'd been pushed past his breaking point. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. About what? But even as she asked, Olivia knew, somehow. Impossibly, the past had caught up with them. About the fact that my supposedly dead wife is very much alive and working as a janitor in my hotel. Ethan's voice was deadly calm, the tone he used when he was fighting to maintain control. About the fact that she's been watching our family, knows about Noah, and is apparently in some kind of danger that could destroy all of us. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "Ethan, I don't understand." "Don't." The word cut through her attempt at denial like a blade. "Don't lie to me." "Olivia, not now. Not when our son's life might be in danger." He moved to her bookshelf and began pulling down photo albums, scattering them across her desk with increasing desperation. Wedding photos, vacation pictures, Noah's birthday parties. The documented history of their life together spread out like evidence at a crime scene. "I know you've been receiving money," he continued, his voice getting more agitated with each word. "Anonymous deposits. Always the same amount. Always on the same day each month. Money that goes to St. Catherine's Children's Home for a little girl named Sophia Martinez." Olivia's carefully constructed world finally crumbled. "How did you—" "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Something didn't feel right about our finances, about the way you'd disappear for hours with no explanation, about the phone calls you'd cut short when I walked into the room." Ethan pulled out a manila folder and dropped it in front of her. "Margaret Chen, licensed private investigator, she's very thorough." With trembling hands, Olivia opened the folder. Inside were photographs of her at St. Catherine's, bank records showing the monthly transfers, copies of forms she'd filled out to establish Sophia's college fund. Her entire secret life laid bare in stark black and white. "There's a little girl who looks exactly like Grace," Ethan continued relentlessly. 10 years old, which means she was born right around the time Grace supposedly died. A little girl who's been getting anonymous support from someone who cares enough to pay for private tutoring and dental care but can't claim her publicly. "Ethan, please, my daughter," the words came out broken, desperate. "I have a daughter I've never met, and you've known about her this entire time." Olivia looked up to find tears streaming down his face, and her heart shattered. "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Tell me why my wife would fake her death and abandon our child. Tell me why you've been secretly supporting a little girl you've never met. Tell me why I feel like everyone in my life has been lying to me for 8 years. The weight of her secrets finally became unbearable. Olivia closed her eyes and made the decision that would either save her family or destroy it completely. Because Marcus is my brother. The silence that followed was deafening. When Olivia opened her eyes, Ethan was staring at her with such betrayal that she wished she could take the words back. Marcus who? Marcus Davenport, the man who's been using your hotels to launder money. The man who took Grace's sister and forced her to spy on you. The man who... She swallowed hard. The man who sent me to that grief counseling group 8 years ago with orders to get close to you. Ethan sank into the chair across from her desk, his face pale with shock. You're telling me that our entire relationship is based on a lie? No. The word came out fierce, desperate. It started as a lie. Yes, Marcus wanted someone inside your life, someone you'd trust, someone who could feed him information about your business, your security, your weaknesses. But Ethan, what happened between us? What we built together? That's real. I fell in love with you. I chose you over him. Chose me. Ethan's voice was hollow. You've been spying on me for 8 years. I've been protecting you for 8 years. Olivia pulled out her laptop and opened the encrypted folder she'd sworn she'd never show him. Look at this. Really look. The screen filled with reports she'd written over the years. Detailed intelligence about Ethan's business operations, his security protocols, his travel schedule, his financial records. But as Ethan read through them, his expression began to change. "These are all wrong," he said slowly. "Deliberately wrong. Every piece of information I sent Marcus was either outdated, incomplete, or completely fabricated. I told him you were expanding into Miami when you were actually buying properties in Seattle. I said your security chief was corrupt when he's the most honest man you employ. I fed him false merger information, fake financial data, anything to keep him interested but prevent him from getting close to what really mattered." Ethan looked up from the laptop, confusion replacing some of the anger in his eyes. "Why?" "Because by the time Marcus realized I was in love with you, it was too late. I was already pregnant with Noah. I was already part of your life in a way that couldn't be undone." Olivia reached across the desk, desperate to make him understand. "So I made a deal with the devil. I'd continue feeding him information as long as he left you and Noah alone, as long as he never hurt our family directly. And Sophia, Grace's daughter, that's where it gets complicated." Olivia pulled out another file, this one containing photos of a beautiful little girl with dark hair and green eyes. "Marcus told me about her 3 years ago, said she was the child of one of his operatives, that she'd been abandoned and needed support. He asked me to set up the anonymous donations as a way to prove my loyalty to him. But you knew she was Grace's daughter. I suspected. The timing, the age, the way Marcus talked about her. And when I saw her for the first time, she looked so much like you." Olivia's voice broke. "I couldn't let her suffer for the sins of the adults in her life, so I made sure she had everything she needed, even if I couldn't give her what she wanted most. Her parents. Olivia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I've been trying to protect everyone, Ethan. You, Noah, Sophia, even Grace in whatever small way I could. But Marcus is getting impatient. He wants more control over your business, more access to your assets. And if he doesn't get it..." Ethan's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it and went completely white. "What is it?" Olivia asked. "Grace. She says it's an emergency. Says our daughter's life depends on it." He looked up at Olivia with haunted eyes. "Marcus has Sophia, doesn't he?" Before Olivia could answer, her own phone rang. She'd retrieved it from under the desk, and Marcus's name appeared on the screen, with trembling fingers. She put it on speaker. "Hello, little sister." Marcus's voice filled the room like poison. "I think it's time we all had a family meeting. Marcus, I have something that belongs to Mr. Caldwell, a lovely little girl with green eyes and a very interesting genetic heritage. She's been asking for her mommy, which is touching since she doesn't actually know who that is." Ethan leaned forward, his voice deadly calm. "If you hurt her..." "Mr. Caldwell, so good to finally speak directly. Your wife has told me so much about you over the years." Marcus's laughter was cold and mechanical. "Now, let's discuss terms. 50% of your hotel chain, transferred to shell corporations I'll provide. You have 12 hours. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning, Chicago will mourn the tragic loss of several beloved citizens in what appears to be a completely random act of violence. Your son's soccer game is at Lincoln Park, isn't it? Lovely venue, very crowded." The line went dead, leaving Ethan and Olivia staring at each other across the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. "He has them all," Olivia whispered. "Sophia, Lily, probably Grace too by now. And he's threatening Noah." Ethan stood up slowly, his face transformed by a cold determination that made Olivia's blood run cold. "Then we're going to stop him. Ethan, you don't understand what you're dealing with. Marcus isn't just a criminal. He's a monster. He's been planning this for over a decade. So have I," Ethan said quietly. "I've been planning for the day someone would try to take everything away from me again. I just never thought it would be the people I trusted most." He walked to the door, then paused. "Pack a bag for Noah. We're not going home tonight." As he left, Olivia stared at the photo of Grace still lying on her desk. The woman in the image was laughing, carefree, unaware that her future held nothing but pain and loss and impossible choices. Now they were all trapped in Marcus's web, and Olivia realized that her 8 years of careful manipulation, her desperate attempts to protect everyone she loved, had only served to make the final confrontation more devastating. The anticipated betrayal had finally arrived, and none of them were prepared for the cost of the truth. The Caldwell Grand Chicago had never looked more beautiful or more dangerous. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the ballroom where Chicago's elite gathered for the annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala, their designer gowns and tuxedos creating a sea of elegant oblivion. None of the guests knew that tonight's charity event would become a battlefield where love, betrayal, and revenge would collide with devastating force. Grace stood in the service corridor behind the ballroom's kitchen, adjusting the black uniform she'd stolen from the catering company's truck. Her hands trembled as she pinned the fake name tag, Maria Santos, to her chest. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was infiltrating her husband's hotel under yet another false identity. But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem routine. Through the service door's small window, she could see Ethan working the room with practiced charm, shaking hands with donors and posing for photographs. He looked magnificent in his tailored black tuxedo, every inch the successful businessman who'd built an empire from grief. But Grace could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the subtle tells that revealed he was barely holding himself together, 3 floors above them. In the hotel's executive suite that had been converted into a makeshift prison, Sophia sat on a couch between Lily and 2 of Marcus's guards. The 10-year-old had stopped crying hours ago, her survival instincts kicking in with a precision that broke Grace's heart. Her daughter, their daughter, was learning the hard way that the world was far more dangerous than the orphanage had ever prepared her for. "You're scared," Sophia said quietly to Lily, who hadn't spoken since the guards had brought the child to the room. Lily looked at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Aren't you?" "Yes, but being scared doesn't help anything. My friend Maya taught me that. She said when bad things happen, you have to look for the good people who are trying to help. And if there aren't any good people," Sophia considered this with the gravity of someone much older, "then you have to be brave enough to help yourself." In the ballroom below, Ethan caught sight of Grace moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne. His chest tightened with a mixture of love, anger, and terror that nearly brought him to his knees. She looked so small among the towering displays of wealth and power, just another invisible worker serving people who barely acknowledged her existence. But he knew better. He knew she was risking everything to save their daughter, their family. Everyone caught in Marcus's web of control and violence. "Mr. Caldwell?" Detective Sarah Kim appeared at his elbow, her evening gown doing little to disguise the fact that she was armed and ready for trouble. "Everything's in position. SWAT teams on standby. Exits covered. Plainclothes officers throughout the venue. And if Marcus follows through on his threat to blow up the building, bomb squad swept the premises twice. If there's an explosive device here, it was brought in tonight." She paused, studying his face. "Sir, are you sure your wife can handle this? We could still abort and try a different approach." Ethan watched Grace disappear into the crowd again, knowing she was moving toward the service elevator that would take her to the executive floor. "She's been handling impossible situations for 11 years, Detective. If anyone can pull this off, it's her." What he didn't say was that he might lose her all over again, that even if they survived tonight, the damage done to their marriage, their family, their future might be irreparable. On the executive floor, Marcus Davenport sat behind Ethan's own desk like a king holding court. He'd changed into a tuxedo for the occasion, as if the evening's festivities were a celebration rather than a hostage situation. His laptop displayed multiple camera feeds from the ballroom, allowing him to watch his prey move through the elegant crowd like pieces on a chessboard. "Such a lovely event," he said to Vincent, who stood guard by the door. All of Chicago's power brokers in one room. Completely unaware that their host is about to sign over half his empire to avoid watching his family die, Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "Boss? About the kid. What about her? She's been asking questions about her mother. Says she knows someone's been taking care of her from a distance. Someone who cares but can't say so." Vincent glanced toward the sitting area where Sophia was quietly comforting Lily. "Smart kid. Too smart, maybe." Marcus followed his gaze, studying the child with clinical interest. "Intelligence is a valuable trait. Vincent, it can also be a dangerous one." His phone buzzed with a message from one of his security team. "Woman in catering uniform heading to executive floor. Matches description of target." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Let her come, But be ready, in the service elevator. Grace said a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. The elevator climbed slowly, each floor bringing her closer to the moment when everything she'd worked for, sacrificed for, would either pay off or collapse in spectacular failure. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a hallway that should have been familiar but now felt like enemy territory. 2 guards flanked the entrance to Ethan's office, both armed, both watching her approach with lazy confidence. "Kitchen service," Grace said in accented English, holding up a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "For the private party." One of the guards reached for his radio, but the other waved him off. "Boss is expecting her." The office door opened to reveal Marcus sitting behind Ethan's desk like he owned it, the sight of him in her husband's space, surrounded by photos of Noah and Olivia, filled Grace with a rage so pure it nearly blinded her. "Grace, so good of you to join us." Marcus gestured to the sitting area where Lily and Sophia waited under armed guard. "I believe you know everyone." Grace's eyes locked on her daughter for the first time in person since the day she'd given birth. Sophia was beautiful, intelligent, brave in the face of terror. Everything Grace had hoped she would become, and everything she'd feared she'd never be able to witness. "Hello, sweetheart," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. Sophia looked up at her with those familiar green eyes, Ethan's eyes, and smiled with a wisdom that belonged to someone much older. "I knew you'd come. I knew you were my secret mom." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She took a step toward her daughter, but Marcus's voice stopped her cold. "Touching reunion, but we have business to discuss." He stood up, revealing the detonator in his hand. "Mr. Caldwell should be receiving a call right about now with instructions on how to transfer ownership of his hotels. Once the paperwork is complete, we can all have a proper family celebration." And if he refuses, Marcus pressed a button on the detonator, and every screen in the office lit up with camera feeds from throughout the hotel. The ballroom packed with innocent people, the kitchen staff preparing dessert, the security guards who had no idea they were standing next to enough explosives to level 3 city blocks. "Then Chicago loses some of its most generous philanthropists, and I find other ways to acquire what I want." Marcus's smile was cold and empty. "Your husband is a smart man, Grace. He'll make the right choice." Grace looked at her daughter, at Lily, who'd suffered 11 years of captivity, at the screens showing hundreds of innocent people dancing and laughing in the ballroom below. Everyone she loved, everyone she'd tried to protect, was trapped in Marcus's final gambit. In the ballroom, Ethan's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but he knew exactly who was calling. "Mr. Caldwell." Marcus's voice was smooth and confident. "I trust you're enjoying the party. Your wife certainly is. She's having a lovely reunion with some old friends." Around him, Chicago's elite continued their elegant celebration, unaware that their lives hung in the balance of a conversation that would determine whether love could triumph over a decade of carefully orchestrated revenge. The gala of the apocalypse was about to begin. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the faces of Chicago's elite, as Ethan held his phone with a grip that could have crushed steel. Around him, the gala continued in blissful ignorance, champagne glasses clinking, laughter echoing, charity donations flowing like water. None of them knew they were sitting on top of enough explosives to turn the Caldwell Grand into a crater. "You have 30 minutes to transfer the ownership documents." Marcus's voice was silk over broken glass. "After that, I start sending pieces of your family down to the ballroom. I need to see them," Ethan said quietly, his eyes scanning the room for Detective Kim. "I need proof they're alive. Of course, a businessman always wants to verify his investments." The line went silent for a moment. Then Grace's voice came through, strained but alive. "Ethan, don't give him anything. Whatever he's threatening, don't—" The sound of a slap echoed through the phone, followed by Marcus's laughter. "Your wife is still giving orders, I see. Some habits never change." In the executive office 3 floors above, Grace held her hand to her stinging cheek and stared at Marcus with undisguised hatred. Sophia had gasped at the violence, but when Grace looked at her daughter, she saw not fear, but fury, the same protective rage that had driven Grace for 11 years. "Don't hurt her," Sophia said, her 10-year-old voice carrying surprising authority. "She's trying to protect everyone." Marcus turned his attention to the child with interest. And who are you to give orders, little one? I'm her daughter and his, and I'm not afraid of you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Grace felt her heart simultaneously break and soar. Break, because her daughter had been forced to grow up too fast. Soar because Sophia was braver than she had any right to be. "Fascinating," Marcus mused. "Vincent, I think our young guest needs to learn some manners." But before Vincent could move, Lily spoke for the first time in hours. "She's right. You know, you can kill us. You can blow up this building. You can take everything Ethan has built. But you can't win, because people like them, people who love each other, they always find a way to survive people like you." Marcus's composure cracked for the first time all evening. "You've been my guest for 11 years, Lily. I'd think you'd have learned better manners by now." "I learned that there are two kinds of people in this world," Lily continued, standing despite her guard's protests. "People who create and people who destroy. You've spent 11 years destroying Grace's life, my life, Ethan's life. But look what they built anyway. Look at this beautiful daughter who's braver than most adults. Look at the love that survived your worst efforts to poison it." In the ballroom, Ethan was coordinating with Detective Kim while maintaining his public facade of gracious host. The SWAT teams were in position, but Marcus held all the cards: hostages, explosives, and the high ground. "Sir," Detective Kim whispered urgently, "we've identified the bomb locations: kitchen, ballroom support columns, executive floor. If he triggers them simultaneously..." "How many people die?" "Everyone in the building. Maybe 300 souls." Ethan closed his eyes, thinking of Noah safely at home with Olivia, thinking of Grace and Sophia trapped upstairs, thinking of all the innocent people who'd come tonight to support children's charities and might die for it. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "North stairwell. Service door. Trust me." "Oh, Olivia?" Somehow, she'd gotten into the building, 20 floors above the ballroom. Noah Caldwell. Bennett sat in his bedroom doing math homework, completely unaware that his entire world was exploding 3 miles away. But Olivia wasn't with him. She was crouched in the Caldwell Grand's north stairwell, having used her knowledge of Marcus's security protocols to slip past his guards. She clutched a backpack containing everything she'd learned about her brother over 8 years of careful documentation: security codes, safe combinations, the location of his dead man's switch, and most importantly, the frequency of the radio detonator he always carried. 8 years of pretending to be Marcus's loyal sister while actually being Ethan's protector had taught her things about both men that neither suspected. She knew Marcus kept a backup detonator in his jacket pocket. She knew he was left-handed and would instinctively reach for it with his dominant hand. She knew he'd rather die than admit defeat. She also knew she was probably about to sacrifice herself to save everyone she'd come to love more than her own life. On the executive floor, Marcus was growing impatient. "Time's up, Mr. Caldwell. Transfer the documents or I start the fireworks." "Wait," Grace said desperately. "There's something you don't know, something about the money." Marcus paused, his finger hovering over the detonator. "What money?" "The Cayman accounts, the Swiss deposits. Ethan's been moving money offshore for months, preparing for something like this. If you kill him now, you'll never access it." It was a lie, of course. But Marcus's greed was as predictable as sunrise. He lowered the detonator slightly, his attention focused on Grace. That's when Olivia struck. She burst through the office door with the desperate fury of a mother protecting her cubs, tackling Marcus before he could react. The detonator flew from his hands, sliding across the polished floor toward Sophia. "Run!" Olivia screamed to Grace and the others as she grappled with Marcus. "Get them out of here!" But Grace didn't run. She couldn't. Not when Olivia, the woman who'd replaced her in Ethan's life, who'd given him Noah, who'd secretly protected Sophia for years, was fighting a monster to save them all. Vincent raised his gun, but Lily launched herself at him with 11 years of suppressed rage, her fingernails going for his eyes. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as they struggled. Grace dove for the detonator, but Marcus broke free from Olivia and reached it first. His finger was moving toward the trigger when Sophia did something that would haunt Grace's dreams forever. The 10-year-old girl threw herself between Marcus and the device, her small body absorbing the impact as he reflexively struck out. No. Grace's scream could have shattered glass. She reached Marcus a second later, her cleaning knife, kept sharp after 11 years of dangerous work, sliding between his ribs with surgical precision. Marcus looked down at the blade in shock, then at Grace with something that might have been respect. "You always were. More than I gave you credit for." He collapsed, his hand finally releasing the detonator. But the damage was already done. Olivia lay crumpled against the wall, blood pooling beneath her from internal injuries sustained in the fight. Her breathing was shallow, labored, the sound of someone whose time was measured in minutes. Grace knelt beside her, this woman who'd been both rival and savior, enemy and protector. "Olivia, hold on. Help is coming." "No," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. "Take care of Noah. Tell him his mother loved him. Tell him I chose love over blood." She reached into her jacket with trembling fingers, pulling out a photograph. Noah on his first day of school, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. "I never got to say goodbye." "You don't have to," Grace said desperately. "You're going to be fine. You're going to tell him yourself." But Olivia's eyes were already closing, her breathing growing fainter. "Tell Ethan. Tell him I'm sorry for everything. Tell him the 8 years we had were the best of my life." Grace held the hand of her husband's second wife as the light faded from her eyes, understanding finally that love wasn't a competition but a continuation. Olivia had loved Ethan and Noah with the same fierce devotion that Grace felt for her own family. In the end, that love had made them sisters, not rivals. Sophia knelt beside them both, tears streaming down her face as she touched Olivia's still hand. "She saved us. She saved everyone." Lily, having subdued Vincent with help from arriving SWAT officers, looked at the scene with exhausted grief. "She chose love," she said quietly. In the end, she chose love over everything else. Through the office windows, they could see the ballroom below, where Chicago's elite continued their party, unaware of how close they'd come to dying, unaware that a woman they'd never met had sacrificed everything to ensure they could go home to their families. Grace pulled Sophia close, finally able to hold her daughter without fear or secrecy. But the embrace was bittersweet, shadowed by the knowledge that their reunion had cost another mother her life. In the ballroom, Ethan's phone rang one final time. This time, it was Grace's voice that greeted him. Broken but alive. "It's over. Come home." But home would never be the same. How could it be, when it was built on the ashes of so much sacrifice? 6 months after the night that changed everything, Grace Caldwell Martinez stood in the doorway of what had once been Ethan's study. Watching her husband help their daughter with algebra homework, the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of their new home in Evanston, smaller than the Lincoln Park mansion they'd shared with Olivia, but filled with a different kind of warmth. Sophia, now 11 and carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived the unthinkable, chewed thoughtfully on her pencil eraser. "I still don't understand why we need to find X. Why can't X just tell us where it is?" Ethan laughed, the sound still catching Grace off guard after months of relearning each other's rhythms. "Because X is shy, it needs us to figure out its secrets. Like Mom was shy about telling us she was alive." Noah's voice carried from the kitchen, where he was supposedly making snacks but clearly eavesdropping on his father and half-sister. The question hung in the air with the weight of still healing wounds. In the months since Olivia's death, Noah had struggled with anger, grief, and the impossible task of understanding why the adults in his life had kept so many secrets. His 8-year-old heart was big enough to love both his mothers, the one who'd raised him and the one who'd given birth to his sister. But the betrayal still stung. "That's different, buddy," Ethan called back. "Mom didn't have a choice. Neither does X," Sophia said pragmatically. "Maybe X is hiding, because someone bad is looking for it." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter had retained the ability to find metaphors in everything, to turn even algebra into a story about protection and love. The therapist said it was Sophia's way of processing trauma, turning the incomprehensible into something manageable through the lens of imagination. The front door opened with the familiar jingle of keys, and Lily's voice echoed through the house. "I'm home, and I brought Chinese food because I know nobody remembered to thaw anything for dinner." At 29, Lily Chen was slowly rebuilding a life that had been stolen from her at 18. The 11 years of captivity had left scars that might never fully heal. But she'd thrown herself into her new role as the family's unofficial aunt with fierce determination. She worked part-time at a nonprofit that helped trafficking victims, attended therapy 3 times a week, and had declared herself personally responsible for ensuring that Grace and Ethan's merged family actually functioned. Aunt Lily. Noah bounded into the kitchen, followed more sedately by Sophia, who'd reached the age where enthusiasm required careful consideration. Grace watched her sister-in-law distribute chopsticks and fortune cookies with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to find joy in the smallest domestic rituals. Lily had lost her 20s to Marcus's cruelty, but she was determined not to lose her 30s to bitterness. How was group therapy? Grace asked, joining them at the kitchen island that served as their informal dining room table. Productive, Doctor. William says I'm making excellent progress in my integration of traumatic experiences into a coherent narrative framework. Lily made air quotes around the clinical language. I told her that's fancy talk for figuring out how to be human again. Ethan appeared in the doorway. His tie loosened after another day of rebuilding his business empire. The FBI investigation into Marcus's money laundering operation had cleared him of wrongdoing, but the scandal had cost him several hotel properties and most of his board of directors. He was rebuilding from scratch, which he claimed was exactly what he needed. Any word from the lawyers? Grace asked as he joined them. The Caldwell Foundation is officially operational, he announced, accepting a carton of lo mein from Lily. Full funding approved for victim services, educational programs, and family reunification efforts. The foundation had been Olivia's idea, proposed in a letter she'd written months before her death and hidden in their safe deposit box. Even in her final months, torn between loyalty to Marcus and love for her chosen family. She'd been planning ways to turn their suffering into something positive. What about the scholarship program? Sophia asked, looking up from her sweet and sour chicken. Fully funded, the Olivia Bennett Memorial Scholarship will help 100 kids from difficult circumstances attend college every year. Ethan's voice still caught when he said Olivia's name, but the pain was softer now, mixed with gratitude for the years they'd shared. Noah had been quiet during dinner, pushing rice around his plate with unusual pensiveness. Finally, he looked up at Grace with his mother's brown eyes and his father's stubborn expression. Do you think Mom Olivia would be proud of what we're doing? He asked. The question hit Grace like a gentle punch to the chest. In the months since Olivia's death, Noah had struggled with the concept of having 2 mothers, one who'd died to save him, one who'd returned from the dead to be with him. Grace and Ethan had worked with therapists to help him understand that love didn't diminish when it was shared, that honoring Olivia's memory didn't mean rejecting Grace's presence. I think she'd be amazed by how brave you've been, Grace said carefully, and how kind you've been to Sophia, and how you've helped Dad and me figure out how to be a family again. She'd probably also tell us to stop being so serious all the time, Lily added with a grin. Olivia was big on fun, from what I remember about the few times I met her. It was true. In the months before her death, when the stress of living a double life was wearing her down, Olivia had compensated by throwing herself into creating joyful memories with Noah. Elaborate birthday parties, spontaneous trips to the zoo, movie marathons that lasted until dawn, as if she'd known her time was limited and wanted to pack as much love as possible into every moment. After dinner, while Lily helped Noah with his reading, and Ethan returned phone calls from contractors, Grace found Sophia on the back porch, staring up at the evening stars. Penny for your thoughts, Grace said, settling into the chair beside her daughter. I was thinking about that night, when everything happened. Sophia's voice was thoughtful, not troubled. I keep wondering what would have happened if Mom Olivia hadn't been there. We all would have died, Grace said honestly. They'd agreed as a family to tell the children the truth, age appropriately but completely. Lies had caused too much damage already, but she was there, even though she didn't have to be, even though it meant leaving Noah without a mom. Sophia turned to look at Grace with those startlingly adult eyes. Do you think that makes her a hero? I think that makes her family, Grace replied. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about choosing to protect people even when it costs you everything. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Chicago skyline light up in the distance. The city looked different from Evanston. Smaller, more manageable, less likely to swallow them whole. Mom. Sophia's voice was small now, younger. Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad you came back. Even though it was scary and people got hurt and everything changed, I'm glad I got to meet my real parents. Grace felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever Sophia acknowledged their relationship so directly. For months, she'd worried that her daughter would resent her for the years of abandonment, the lies, the danger her return had brought. Instead, Sophia had embraced their complicated family with the adaptability of someone who'd never taken love for granted. "I'm glad too, baby. More glad than I can ever tell you." Later that night, after the children were asleep and Lily had retreated to her apartment above the garage, Grace and Ethan sat on their couch going through foundation paperwork. It was domestic and boring and absolutely perfect. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Coming back, destroying the life you'd built as Socorro?" Grace looked up from the scholarship applications spread across her lap. "Do you regret rebuilding your life after I died? Do you regret marrying Olivia, having Noah?" "Never." "Then you have your answer." She leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "We both did what we thought was right with the information we had. We both survived. We both found our way back to each other. Everything else is just details." Ethan kissed the top of her head, a gesture so familiar it might have been muscle memory. "I love you, Grace Caldwell." "I love you too, Ethan Caldwell." Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual evening energy. Somewhere in the city, other families were dealing with their own complications, their own secrets, their own versions of love and loss and redemption. But inside their small house in Evanston, the Caldwell family had found something that Marcus Davenport had never understood. That love, real love, wasn't about possession or control or winning. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when the choice was difficult, even when the choice cost everything, even when the choice required forgiving the unforgivable and rebuilding from ashes. They were proof that families could be born from trauma and still flourish, that love could survive death, betrayal, and 11 years of separation, that sometimes the most broken things, when put back together with care, became stronger than they'd ever been before. And in a world that often felt defined by what tore people apart, that was a miracle worth celebrating.